Now, the latest addition to the NewsHour bookshelf. The winner of this year's National Book Award for Young People's Literature addresses a grown-up subject, adoption. Jeffrey Brown spoke to author Robin Benway recently at the Miami Book Fair about her new young adult novel, Far from the Tree.
So this is a book about, in one way it's about adoption.
Yes.
But it's about more than that, clearly, about family and family ties.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to think of it?
It was actually a song lyric that inspired the very basic idea.
A song lyric?
A song lyric, yeah. I was in a Costco parking lot, and I was desperate for ideas, and I had just told my publisher, I'm so sorry, I don't have any ideas, you're going to have to wait a while. And they were lovely and very fine with that. Mm-hmm. And I heard a song while I was in a parking lot, and I just immediately was like, this book is about adoption. And that's how the
What was the song?
It was a Florence and the Machine song.
Falling star fell from your heart and landed in my arms.
I've heard it 1,000 times before, and I've heard it 1,000 times since. And for some reason, that alchemy of that day in that parking lot just made me think of adoption and biological mother maybe putting her daughter up for adoption and hoping that some of the love she has for her child stays within that child as that child goes through a life that she won't get to see.
So fill in a little bit of the story. There's 3 siblings who are biological siblings, but have been separated.
Exactly. So 3 siblings, none of whom know about each other. They've all been put up for adoption as babies. The oldest, Joaquin, does not end up getting adopted. He actually grows up in foster care. These younger 2 sisters, Grace and Maya, are privately adopted. And the book opens with Grace, the 16-year-old, getting pregnant and then putting her own daughter up for adoption. And she suddenly feels that connection with her biological mom, and she decides to go looking for her with her parents' support. And in looking for her mom, finds Joaquin and her younger sister, Maya. And the story is told from all 3 of their perspectives, and you see how as siblings do, as their lives start to intertwine and intersect.
And for you, this became a way to look at what is nature and nurture and all kinds of...
I think one of my favorite topics is the idea of family, and specifically found family. What makes your family? Is it blood? Is it circumstance? Is it time? And is it closeness? And so I think I examined all of those things sort of inadvertently as I looked at all 3 of their stories and how they came together.
And how did you build these characters?
It took a very long time. It was about 6 to 8 months of research because I personally am not adopted and I haven't adopted. And I knew that I was wading into a very, very deep sea of information. And I just wanted to make sure that I don't think there's any way to get it right. And there's absolutely no way to capture every single adoptee's or adoptive parent's experience. But I just wanted to make sure that these 3 stories were as accurate as possible.
So what kind of research did you do?
I read books, I read blogs. At one point I had so many books on my dining room table that a neighbor came over and said, saw the stack of books about adoption and went, oh my goodness, congratulations. And I said, no, it's for a book. It's for a book. The book, there's no baby, just a book. And I did a lot of personal interviews. I talked to adoption attorneys. I talked to parents who privately adopted, talked to foster parents, social workers.
And you ended up using these stories
Every
or using
single one.
pieces of it?
Yeah, people were just so lovely and open with me, and they told me so much about their lives and, all these intimate details about their children and about their parents and the experience that they've had. And the adoption attorney told me about the women that he's met. And I didn't use any of their stories personally, but just the circumstances behind them were really helpful.
But all toward fiction, right? You never thought about, I should write a book about adoption at this point.
You know what? No, because the thing with fiction is that you can expand the world or decrease the world as much as you want. And with nonfiction, you're working with facts, and which you should. And so I thought, I really want these siblings to be fictional characters. But at the end, they felt so real, and they still feel so real to me.
By giving them different histories, you're able to look at different aspects of American life, right? So class and race. You wanted to get into these things?
I wouldn't say I wanted to. It's, those are really treacherous subjects sometimes. But I didn't know how to tell a story about adoption without talking about those things. And if I didn't, I thought the book would be a little anemic. Private adoption is so expensive in America. So does that mean that only, wealthy people can adopt a baby? When you look at there was a big NPR story about the cost of private adoption based on the race of the baby. And that was really eye-opening and, awkward and strange. And then, I looked at foster care, and I looked at who ends up in foster care, not only who ends up in foster care, but who stays in foster care. These boys of color don't get adopted and they become men of color at 13, 14, 15, and seeing, how they stay in the system.
So you're writing in these different voices in alternating chapters. How do you How do you capture teen voices?
You know, I think it's a mistake to try to capture a voice because you have to remember the way teenagers talk to each other, the way they talk to their parents, the way they talk to their teachers, and then I think most importantly, the way they talk to themselves, you know, that inner voice and the way that they feel about things. Sometimes it's difficult for them to articulate, as it is for all of us,
Right.
you know. But I think you have to remember that the fear and the longing and the excitement and the emotion of it, and you just try to be as honest with that as possible.
And you remember that.
I remember it painfully vividly, yes.
All right, the book is Far from the Tree, winner of the National Book Award for Young People's Literature, Robin Benway. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much.